Millions assert that the philosophy of Christ is perfect, that he was the wisest that ever uttered speech. Let us see. Resist not evil. If smiting on one cheek, turn the other. Is there any philosophy, any wisdom in this? Christ takes from goodness, from virtue, from the truth, the right of self-defense. Vice becomes the master of the world, and the good become the victims of the infamous. No man has the right to protect himself, his property, his wife, and children. Government becomes impossible, and the world is at the mercy of criminals. Is there any absurdity beyond this? Love your enemies. Is this possible? Did any human being ever love his enemies? Did Christ love his? When he denounced them as whited sepulchres, hypocrites, and vipers? We cannot love those who hate us. Hatred in the hearts of others does not breed love in ours. Not to resist evil is absurd. To love your enemies is impossible. Take no thought for the morrow. The idea was that God would take care of us as he did of sparrows and lilies. Is there the least sense in that belief? Does God take care of anybody? Can we live without taking thought for the morrow? To plow, to sow, to cultivate, to harvest is to take thought for the morrow. We plan and work for the future, for our children, for the unborn generations to come. Without this forethought, there could be no progress, no civilization. The world would go back to the caves and dens of savagery. If thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out. If thy right hand offend thee, cut it off. Why? Because it is better that one of our members should perish than that the whole body should be cast into hell. Is there any wisdom in putting out your eyes or cutting off your hands? Is it possible to extract from these extravagant sayings the smallest grain of common sense? Swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is his holy city. Here we find the astronomy and geology of Christ. Heaven is the throne of God, the monarch, and the earth is his footstool, a footstool that turns over at the rate of 1,000 miles an hour and sweeps through space at the rate of over 1,000 miles a minute. Where did Christ think heaven was? Why was Jerusalem a holy city? Was it because the inhabitants were ignorant, cruel, and superstitious? If a man sue thee at law and take away your coat, give him your cloak also. Is there any philosophy, any good sense in that commandment? Would it not be just as sensible to say, if a man obtains a judgment against you for $100, give him 200? Only the insane could give or follow this advice. Think not I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother. If this is true, how much better it would have been if he had remained away. Is it possible that he who said, resist not evil, came to bring a sword? That he who said, love your enemies, came to destroy the peace of the world? To set father against son, and daughter against father? What a glorious mission! He did bring a sword, and the sword was wet for 1,000 years with innocent blood. In millions of hearts he sowed the seeds of hatred and revenge. He divided nations and families, put out the light of reason, and petrified the hearts of men. And every one that hath forsaken houses, or brethren, or sisters, or father, or mother, or wife, or children, or lands, for my name's sake, shall receive 100-fold, and shall inherit everlasting life. According to the writer of Matthew, Christ, the compassionate, the merciful, uttered these terrible words. Is it possible that Christ offered the bribe of eternal joy to those who would desert their fathers, their mothers, their wives, and children? Are we to win the happiness of heaven by deserting the ones we love? Is a home to be ruined here for the sake of a mansion there? And yet it is said that Christ is an example for the world. Did he desert his father and mother? He said, speaking to his mother, Woman, what have I to do with thee? The Pharisees said unto Christ, Is it lawful to pay tribute unto Caesar? Christ said, Show me the tribute money. They brought him a penny, and he saith unto them, Whose is the image and the superscription? They said, Caesar's. And Christ said, "Rendered unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's." Did Christ think that the money belonged to Caesar because his image and superscription were stamped upon it? Did the penny belong to Caesar or to the man who had earned it? Had Caesar the right to demand it because it was adorned with his image? Does it appear from this conversation that Christ understood the real nature and use of money? Can we now say that Christ was the greatest of philosophers? He never said a word in favor of education. He never even hinted at the existence of any science. He never uttered a word in favor of industry, economy, or of any effort to better our condition in this world. He was the enemy of the successful, of the wealthy. Dives was sent to hell not because he was bad, but because he was rich. Lazarus went to heaven not because he was good, but because he was poor. Christ cared nothing for painting, for sculpture, for music, nothing for any art. He said nothing about the duties of nation to nation, of king to subject, nothing about the rights of man, nothing about intellectual liberty or the freedom of speech. He said nothing about the sacredness of home, not one word for the fireside, not a word in favor of marriage and honor of maternity. He never married. He wandered homeless from place to place with a few disciples. None of them seem to have been engaged in any useful business, and they seem to have lived on alms. All human tithes were held in contempt. This world was sacrificed for the next. All human effort was discouraged. God would support and protect. At last, in the dusk of death, Christ, finding that he was mistaken, cried out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" We have found that man must depend on himself. He must clear the land. He must build the home. He must plow and plant. He must invent. He must work with hand and brain. He must overcome the difficulties and obstructions. He must conquer and enslave the forces of nature to the end that they may do the work of the world. Was he kinder, more forgiving, more self-sacrificing than Buddha? Was he wiser? Did he meet death with more perfect calmness than Socrates? Was he more patient, more charitable than Epictetus? Was he a greater philosopher, a deeper thinker than Epicurus? In what respect was he the superior to Zoroaster? Was he gentler than Lao-tzu, more universal than Confucius? Were his ideas of the human rights and duties superior to those of Zeno? Did he express grander truths than Cicero? Was his mind suppler than Spinoza's? Was his brain equal to Kepler's or Newton's? Was he grander in death, a sublimer martyr than Bruno? Was he in intelligence and the force and beauty of expression, and breadth and scope of thought, and wealth of illustration, and aptness of compassion, and knowledge of the human brain and heart of all passions, hopes and fears, the equal of Shakespeare, the greatest of the human race? If Christ was in fact God, he knew all the future. Before him, like a panorama, moved the history yet to be. He knew how his words would be interpreted. He knew what crimes, what horrors, what infamies would be committed in his name. He knew that the hungry flames of persecution would climb around the limbs of countless martyrs. He knew that thousands and thousands of brave men and women would languish in dungeons and darkness, filled with pain. He knew that his church would invent and use instruments of torture, that his followers would appeal to whip and pyre, to chain and rack. He saw the horizon of the future lurid with the flames of the auto da fe. He knew that creeds would spring like poisonous fungi from every text. He saw the ignorant sects waging war against each other. He saw thousands of men, under the orders of priests, building prisons for their fellow men. He saw thousands of scaffolds dripping with the best and bravest blood. He saw his followers using the instruments of pain. He heard the groans, saw the faces white with agony. He heard the shrieks and sobs and cries of all the moaning, martyred multitudes. He knew that commentaries would be written on his words with swords, to be read by the light of pyres. He knew that the Inquisition would be born of the teachings attributed to him. He saw the interpolations and falsehoods that hypocrisy would write and tell. He saw all wars that would be waged, and he knew that above these fields of death, these dungeons, these rackings, these burnings, these executions, for 1,000 years would float the dripping banner of the cross. He knew that hypocrisy would be robed and crowned, that cruelty and credulity would rule the world, knew that liberty would perish from the earth, knew that popes and kings in his name would enslave the souls and bodies of men, knew that they would persecute and destroy the discoverers, thinkers, and inventors, knew that his church would extinguish reason's holy light and leave the world without a star. He saw his disciples extinguishing the eyes of men, flaying them alive, cutting out their tongues, searching for all the nerves of pain. He knew that in his name his followers would trade in human flesh, that cradles would be robbed and women's breasts unbathed for gold, and yet he died with voiceless lips. Why did he fail to speak? Why did he not tell his disciples, and through them the world, "You shall not burn, imprison, or torture in my name. You shall not persecute your fellow men"? Why did he not plainly say, "I am the Son of God," or "I am God"? Why did he not explain the Trinity? Why did he not tell the mode of baptism that was pleasing to him? Why did he not write a creed? Why did he not break the chains of slaves? Why did he not say that the Old Testament was or was not the inspired word of God? Why did he not write the New Testament himself? Why did he leave his words to ignorance, hypocrisy, and chance? Why did he not say something positive, definite, and satisfactory about another world? Why did he not turn the tear-stained hope of heaven into the glad knowledge of another life? Why did he not tell us something of the rights of man, of the liberty of hand and brain? Why did he go dumbly to his death, leaving the world to misery and to doubt? I will tell you why. He was a man and did not know.